study section 9. Alternative theories to liberal theory. Introduction. Feminism is the fundamental belief that women are people. In other words, feminism is an obligation to reaching the equality of the sexes. This essential view is not limited to women, men, while promoting from being the dominant sex, also have a appeal in overpowering the preventive roles that withdraw them of full humanity. Learning outcomes for study section 9. After you have studied this study section, you should be able to examine the term feminism, define communitarianism, discuss European history and the history of feminism. Feminism is a movement that agitates for women's rights. It started in the 19th century, but it became much more intensified in the 20th century. The whole idea of feminism is that women have been subjugated or oppressed in a patriarchal or male-dominated society from time immemorial. They claim that if you look at all societies, women have always been dominated, or their history has always been that of domination. They claim that through this domination, women's rights or freedoms have been completely suppressed or curtailed, as the case may be. They further claimed that in male-dominated society, women have always been suppressed. They have been debarred either in the family or public sphere and allowed to operate only in the household. It is this form of oppression, either in the family or public sphere, that the feminist scholars and activists have campaigned that women should be given their rights. They believe that women have been dehumanized, and as such, their being has been completely suppressed. They become the order of the men. It is also contended by the feminists that women have always been demonized by men and have been taken as sexual objects. In any sphere of life, women have always been relegated to the background in the patriarchal society. The agitation of feminist scholars or activists is simply to erase these forms of suppression of women, in that women should have the same rights as men. They claim that this oppression of women has been naturalized, that is, it is as if nature has ordered it that way, and men have always alluded to this as a natural order of things, that women should play the second fiddle. However, the argument goes, it is a social construction. In other words, the basis of all these oppressions is simply man-made construction, which is culturally embedded, or put in another way, which has been given a kind of blessing by the culture of society. One of the claims which have been disputed is that of women not rational, and that they are given to emotion. Hence, the irrational element is much more pronounced in their activities, and it is believed that this is a natural thing, whereas men are rational and are such that rationality makes them to be much more superior, and this is grounded on nature. It is all these claims, as earlier pointed out, that the feminist scholars and activists have disputed or debunked. They claim that women are just like men psychologically, although there might be some anatomical differences. But on the whole, there is no much difference between men and women. There are many versions of feminism: conservative or liberal feminism, and the radical or the leftist feminism. The liberal feminist does not go too far. What they agitate for does not go too far. They agitate that women should have equal rights or should enjoy the same freedom as men, either in the public sphere or family. They claim that the constitution of liberal democratic society should be followed to the letter by granting or enforcing the rights of everyone in the state. So briefly stated, the liberal feminists anchor their agitations on the rights of freedom for the individuals in the state, which include women. The radicals include socialists, Marxists, postmodernists, as well as anarchists. What they are saying is that capitalism is the root cause of women oppression, in that in the capitalist system, the state exploits and oppresses all classes, but this is much more pronounced with women. Women are not given many roles in the public sphere. They are therefore disempowered. In a nutshell, feminism is a movement that has been able to empower women and have their voices heard in the public arena, and they have also made us to rethink some of the conceptions you have about women. Communitarianism. Communitarianism is a philosophical idea that has been proposed or embraced by some group of philosophers. They believe that the liberal idea, which has been embraced by some philosophers like Rawls and Nozick, in terms of their social justice theories, do not actually do justice or capture the notion of community, which shapes the individuals in their attitudes and behavior. These philosophers like Alex McIntyre, Charles Taylor, Michael Sandel, and Walzer argued that the liberal conception of justice has focused mostly on the individuals as being autonomous and as such constitute the focus of social justice. They argued further that the liberals have missed an important dimension of how justice should be conceived, and their own position is to bring back the community into the picture. They believe that liberalism emphasizes atomistic dimension of human community, that it focuses mainly on the individuals, and in doing so, the individuals are seen as being separate from each other. They argue that this is a wrong-headed approach, as earlier pointed out. The individuals have their being according to them in the community, and the community shapes them in terms of the way they look at life, attitudes, and morals. Hence, the community is an important element in people's life. The individual being is not a solitary person but has its own life in the community in which he or she lives. The individuals are embedded in their community, and this makes them part and parcel of that community in which the individuals live. It is therefore a wrong-headed approach for the liberals in their social justice approach to emphasize the individual as an autonomous human being living like a Robinson Crusoe marooned in an island living alone. These communitarian philosophers believe that what should be stressed in human solidarity rather than atomistic dimension that the liberals emphasize. They contend that because of this atomistic dimension, individuals are lost, and what you find in Western societies now is alienation of people, alcoholism, as well as drug abuse. They argue that the virtue of the community that you find in Aristotelian philosophy should be brought back. In conclusion, the communitarian philosophers have attracted the liberal social theory of justice on the ground that the community is not the focus of that theory. European history and the history of feminism. The study of European women's history can add significant understandings to the exercise of kind and therefore defining feminism for current readers in other settings. As Americans, a comparative historical approach forces us to broaden our viewpoint by examining carefully from a different, though not solely unaware, angle much that we take for granted, namely the political, social, and economic context in which so countless of our own ideas originated. Thus, it permits us not only to improve and divide the usual and dissecting opinions on the organization of societies, which are surrounded historically in the Western debate on the woman question, but also to search the political dynamics of the interface between these views. In the 1970s, generation of American historians began to examine the history of European women and their women's movement. We understood feminism in a rather basic and straightforward way. According to a merged English language definition, then found in most American dictionaries, a feminist was defined as a person who advocated feminism. But what was feminism? The dictionary definition in Composite read almost as follows: a theory and or movement concerned with progressing the position of women through such means as attainment of political, legal, or economic rights equal to those established men by emphasis. This was also the viewpoint carried by the best-known histories of the American women's movement published prior to 1970, in which feminism efficiently began in 1848 at Seneca Falls, and the focus was on votes for women. The key idea here is the means to the end of advancement, rights equal to those granted men. Notice the level to which this legalistic definition of equal rights suggests the standard of male adulthood as a norm. It is a definition that is conveyed in the vocabulary of rights common to the Western tradition, but developed most clearly in the political theory and practice of Great Britain and the United States, which are so long engrossed on expanding the rights and freedoms of male individuals on grounds of principle. For women, the vote, the accomplishment of legal control over property and person, and entry into male-dominated professions and institutional orders became the symbolic questions. Those of us in European history soon revealed that this English language dictionary definition of feminism did not serve us well. We found its descriptive power insufficient for the accurate indication about the goals and activities of women's supporters and women's movements on the European continent during the 19th century and before. Even though questions of access to male privilege and power were unquestionably essential for women and men in the European past, they require other goals as well. Besides, the ways in which Europeans convey their claims looked to change greatly from the Anglo-Americans. Europeans focused as much or more on explanations of womanliness. They distinguished sexual difference rather than comparison within a framework of male-female complementarity. And instead of seeking unqualified admission to male-dominated society, they attached a wide-ranging analysis of the society and its institutions. Summary for Study Section 9. In this Study Section 9, you have learned that feminism is a movement against the oppression of women in a male-dominated society, and different strands of it were discussed. Communitarianism is against the atomistic liberal theory. It stresses the communal aspect of the individual. Communitarianism is a philosophical idea that has been proposed or embraced by some group of philosophers. They believe that the liberal idea, which has been embraced by some philosophers like Rawls and Nozick in terms of their social justice theories, do not actually do justice or capture the notion of community, which shapes the individuals in their attitudes and behavior. The study of European women's history can add significant understandings to the exercise of kind and therefore defining feminism for current readers in other settings. As Americans, a comparative historical approach forces us to broaden our viewpoint by examining carefully from a different, though not solely unaware angle, much that we take for granted, namely the political, social, and economic context in which so countless of our own ideas originated. Thus, it permits us not only to improve and divide the usual and dissenting opinions on the organization of societies, which are surrounded historically in the Western debate on the woman question, but also to search the political dynamics of the interface between these views. In the 1970s, generation of American historians began to examine the history of European women and their women's movement. We understood feminism in a rather basic and straightforward way. According to a merged English language definition then found in most American dictionaries, a feminist was defined as a person who advocated feminism. But what was feminism? The dictionary definition in Composite read almost as follows: a theory and or movement concerned with progressing the position of women through such means as attainment of political, legal, or economic rights equal to those established men. My emphasis. This is the end of study section 9. Thanks for listening.